Today I'm going to be talking about 22 of the films that were nominated at this year's Oscars. I'm really only focusing on the categories of Best Picture, Animated category, all the acting categories, and the 2 writing categories. So all the films from those categories, except for one that I wasn't able to find. There's not really a particular order here. I mean, there kind of is, but it's loose, so it doesn't really matter, other than that I'm starting with the animated movies. I'm probably going to end up repeating myself a lot, because with a lot of these I just felt like, it was okay, I guess I can see why I was nominated for what it was nominated for. Or sometimes I can't really see it, and I just thought it was mediocre and overrated. But I'll get to that anyway. First up is Loving Vincent. Along those same lines of what I was just talking about, I thought this movie was just okay. But I feel like that might be the general consensus anyway. The reason this movie is getting so much attention is because it's the first movie that was rotoscoped with every frame of the movie being a painting. Literally every frame a painting. Like that saying, except real. And it totally deserves recognition for that. That aspect of the movie is really impressive, but the rest of it isn't really that impressive. The category of Best Animated Picture is kind of vague, at least I think it is, because it's like, is it the movie with the best animation, or is it the best movie that happens to be animated? Because if it's just the best movie that happens to be animated, this movie isn't really anything special. But if it's the movie with the best animation, then this movie is really something special. I kind of see the category as a blend of both of those things, so yeah, I can see why it's nominated, but other than that, I just thought it was fine. It kept me just interested enough. The only real problem I had was the casting. None of the actors and actresses looked like who they were supposed to be playing. They showed in the credits the characters next to their paintings of the people they were portraying, and no one looked like who they were supposed to be portraying. Even with the animation filter where they could have made people look more like the people they were supposed to be portraying. Although I know that would have been hard, but what would have been easier is just find people that look like the actual people. It's not that big of a deal, except for with Van Gogh, because the guy who they got to play Van Gogh looks nothing like him. That bothers me the most. The rest of them, it's like, it doesn't matter that much, but this movie is about Van Gogh, and he's a big historical figure. People know what he looks like because of his many self-portraits, so I don't know. I feel like they should have gotten someone who looks at least a little bit similar. There's the guy who was Lex Luthor's dad on Smallville. He kind of looks like Van Gogh a little bit. It'd be a little old though, but it is animated, so I don't know. I gave the movie a 7 out of 10, mostly just because of the animation. Another movie that was nominated in this category was The Breadwinner. I hadn't heard of this movie until I saw that it was nominated, but I'm glad that I have heard of it now because I really like this movie. If you haven't heard of it either, or you just heard about it in the Oscars and you're just like, it doesn't look that interesting, it is pretty interesting. I'd recommend checking it out. I wish more people were talking about it, honestly. I guess maybe it's kind of an obscure movie a little bit. On IMDb, it looks like it hasn't gotten that much attention, like even compared to something like Loving Vincent. That grossed $6 million, while The Breadwinner didn't even gross $500,000. Not that gross means everything, but still. It had a really good story and the animation looked nice. So yeah, seriously, check it out. It was really good. And it really made me think about people that are in that kind of situation that the characters in the movie were in, which I feel like I don't really do that much. But this movie really put you in that situation where you can see the struggle of people that live like this, that have to live like this because that's what their country's like. It's a shame that a movie like this would have to go up against The Boss Baby, which is the next movie I'm going to talk about. I mean, I'm going to be honest, this movie wasn't terrible. If you saw in my last video when I talked about the top 10 worst movies of 2017, I didn't even mention this. I don't think it was one of the worst movies of the year. I actually kind of liked it, just a little bit. I mean, it's based on a picture book, and they actually don't do that bad of a job adapting the story from the picture book. Like, they condense that into the first couple minutes of the movie, and then just extend it from there, which is a really cool way to do that, unlike the next movie I'm going to talk about, but we'll get to that. It even had some cool different styles of animation, just like Captain Underpants and Trolls had. You use this in, like, the main kid's imagination sequences. The story didn't really make sense, which could bug some people. It bugged me a little bit, but the foundation for the story was already so weird that you just kind of go with it. It still had a lot of stupid jokes, and I think the character design and the main animation still looked really bad, but overall it was okay. Just the fact that The Boss Baby is nominated for an Oscar, and not even like a lower tier Oscar like Suicide Squad was, like, is nominated for Best Animated Picture. I keep saying that. I don't think that's the right name for the category, but whatever. That's like a big category. It's the main animation category. I mean, there's really only 2, but unless you count visual effects. The Boss Baby is not a movie that should be nominated for an Oscar. That's just what I have to say about that. That's not really to say anything about the quality of the movie. Well, it kind of is, but yeah, whatever. I'll move on now to Ferdinand. This movie wasn't really that bad. I mean, it was kind of sickeningly sweet, like how lighthearted it was. Sometimes it was okay, sometimes it was just like, okay, I get it. The biggest problem for me with this movie was how they tried to adapt the classic children's book, Ferdinand, which was already adapted pretty well back in the 30s when Disney did an animated short about it. That was a pretty good adaptation of the book already. And now they turn it into a wacky CG children's movie that's just oh so happy and feel good with some butt jokes thrown in too, just cause, you know, whatever. That's what kids like, right? And the story deserves better than that. This movie did not need to exist at all. There was already the Disney short, and that captured the whole story of the book. All this did was add a bunch of nonsense. If you ignore the source material, it's a fine movie, like just fine, but you shouldn't ignore the source material. So this movie sucks. And finally, in the animation category, we have Coco. I really don't even know where to begin with this movie, and I don't want to take up too much time because I have so many more movies to get into. So to try to make things quick, I'll just say, much like I think a lot of people, I didn't have very high expectations for this movie. I just thought it looked kind of dumb. The trailer didn't make it look very interesting, and you know, there's already the Book of Life, so why do we need this movie? There's already a movie about the Day of the Dead. But this movie is completely different and way better than the Book of Life. They're not even comparable. So it's stupid that there even should be the comparison. I mean, why shouldn't there be more than one movie about this holiday? Not only do I think this movie celebrates this holiday really well, although I'm not really one to say that since I know nothing about the holiday, but it feels like it celebrates it really well. So not only does it do that, but this movie made me cry, which I literally can't remember another movie that has made me do that. There are movies that have come close, like I Am Big Bird and The Green Mile, I guess. And there probably are other movies that have made me cry. The Green Mile might have even made me cry, I don't remember. I just know that with those movies, I teared up a little bit, but nothing really came out. And there's probably a movie that's made me cry, but Coco is the first one that I can remember that tears were actually streaming down my face. And I actually went back and saw this movie again in theaters, and I still cried. So for a movie to do that, that's just a seal of approval right there. I don't want to say what made me cry. I really don't want to get into this movie too much. Just go see it. It's an amazing movie. Alright, done with animation now. Next is The Florida Project. This is a pretty unique movie. I feel like I really haven't seen anything like it. It's weird. It's like watching this is peering in these characters' lives. Like more so than any other movie I've seen. The only other movie I can think of that does anything like this is Manchester by the Sea, but that's totally different. Or at least it's presented totally different. This movie feels realistic like that one did, but I think this movie does a better job of it. I think Manchester by the Sea is a better movie just because it has a better story, or it has better moments, I guess. Like the moments made me feel more, I don't know, I don't want to compare this to Manchester by the Sea, but this movie didn't really have a super interesting story. It's just interesting to watch the characters. But I don't think the movie was that special overall just because of that. It was just done in a special way. And it does deserve credit for that though. And the lead kid in it did a great job. Roman J. Israel Esquire. That's not the name of the kid from the Florida Project. That's another movie. It's the movie Denzel Washington's nominated for. It's the only nomination this movie has. It's from Dan Gilroy, the writer and director of Nightcrawler, which is one of my favorite movies. At least it's in my top 50 anyway. I thought Nightcrawler was a really interesting character study, and I feel the same way about this movie. Although I think I like Nightcrawler a bit more. Roman J. Israel was still a really interesting character. Not as interesting as the guy from Nightcrawler, but at least I can remember his name. It was a huge snub when Jake Gyllenhaal wasn't nominated for Nightcrawler for Best Actor, but at least this time Denzel Washington was nominated. I mean, I haven't really gone over the categories yet to see what I really think about that nomination, but considering that Jake Gyllenhaal wasn't nominated last time, I think it's cool that Denzel Washington was nominated this time, even though he's already had a bunch of nominations from other movies. I didn't understand some of the parts of the story because I wasn't totally familiar with the stuff they were discussing, but overall the movie wasn't too confusing. The basic conflict and story were decipherable for me. The score was a bit generic, but the soundtrack was great. There were some really great tracks in it, including Time Has Come Today. The scene that they used that song in just highlighted it so well, and I think it's definitely my favorite scene in the movie. Next is I, Tonya. I didn't really know anything about Tonya Harding going into this movie, which I didn't think would matter, and it didn't really. I still understood the story, but once they get into the second half and the big controversy, they say stuff like, "This is why you're all here, we don't need to explain anything." And I was just like, what? Explain what? Who's Nancy Kerrigan? I guess I'm the only person in the world that wasn't familiar familiar with Tonya Harding before this movie came out. I mean, I knew the name, but I didn't know who she was. So if you're like me and you didn't know anything about her story, and you want to see this movie, which I recommend, by the way, I thought it was really good. The first half wasn't incredibly interesting, but once I got into the second half, I was really enjoying it. Anyway, I'd say maybe look into her story a little bit before you watch it. It's not totally necessary, but I feel like they made the movie under the impression that people were going to be familiar with her anyway, so you might as well. Also, the soundtrack is great in this too. Logan is nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, and I already did a video on that, so you can go watch that. I'm not going to bother talking about it again. There might be a link up here somewhere, a little info bar thing. I don't know, I'm not going to promise anything. I learned my lesson with Sleepless in Theater. The Disaster Artist is a movie with a lot of issues. Issues that other people more coherent than me have already pointed out, so go watch a Red Letter Media video or something. They probably sum it up better than I could, but to give you an idea, the way they adapted the book didn't really work very well. See what I mean? I'm not good at phrasing this, but they like half made it feel more like a movie and half tried to stick to the story of the book. And because they didn't really go one way or the other, that kind of hurt the story. I don't know how to put this. I'll just say I think the casting was really bad. People have mentioned this too. James Franco just cast his friends, his Hollywood friends, to be in this. People who probably also liked The Room. I mean, his brother is literally playing the main character. That's probably the worst casting choice of the entire movie. There are some that work okay, like Nathan Fielder, even though he doesn't really look anything like the guy he's supposed to be playing. He still works okay. But Dave Franco was nothing like Greg Sestero. I really don't think this movie should be nominated for anything, especially not Best Adapted Screenplay, because that's one of the things they really didn't do a good job with. I am glad that James Franco won a Golden Globe for playing Tommy Wiseau, though. If just for the fact that Tommy Wiseau was on stage at the Golden Globes, which is hilarious. Although I also saw The Room for the first time last year, and I think that's a totally overrated movie too. Even though people know it sucks, but they think it's like one of the most entertaining bad movies, and I don't think it really was. I think it was mostly boring. That might just be because all the funny things have already been pointed out, so I've already seen them. That's probably why, honestly. The Big Sick is also nominated. I don't really have any thoughts about this movie, honestly. I agree with the consensus. I think it was good, maybe a bit to a lesser extent than most people did, but I still thought it was really good. I don't know. I don't really feel like I need to elaborate on that. Pretty self-explanatory. Next is Molly's Game. Funny thing about this movie, it says it's based on the book, but half the movie takes place after the book was released. We know this because the book is a key component to the story. I mean, it's one thing in a movie like Zodiac to show the book the movie's based on at the end of the movie as like an Easter egg or something, but it's another thing for the book to be such an important aspect of the movie based on said book. It's a weirdly fourth wall breaking thing for a biopic to do. I don't know, this isn't really a complaint, but I just thought it was silly for them to say the movie was still based on the book. Anyway, I just thought this was a really interesting story, told really well. It was a little hard to follow at first with the jumping back and forth through time, but pretty quickly I started staying in one spot for longer periods of time, so it wasn't too disorienting after that. Not that I can't handle movies that do that, but I think it also kind of pulled an I, Tonya a little bit, where they assume you've already heard of Molly Bloom in some capacity, which is the person the movie's based on, and I had not heard of her. And so that, with the jumping back and forth through time, made it a little confusing. I also don't hold that against the movie either, it's just a note. I don't know, I really liked it. I totally recommend seeing it. Same with Mudbound. I didn't really think I was gonna like this movie. Movies about race relations never seem like they're gonna be interesting to me, so I never want to watch them. But the way this story unfolded was really interesting. So I'm glad the Oscars kind of forced me to watch it, just because I was watching all the nominations. Finally, we're moving on to the movies in the Best Picture category, and these first couple I really didn't think were that great, gonna be honest. The Post, I don't know, I don't really find these kind of movies entertaining. There were some suspenseful moments that were kind of cool, but overall it just felt like it's going to be forgettable in the long run. It's just going to blend in with all the other newspaper movies in my head. I feel like the recent sketch on Late Night with Seth Meyers summed it up pretty well. I wouldn't recommend this movie, but I would recommend checking out that sketch called Newspaper Movie, where it just sums up all newspaper Oscar movies in one video. The only thing I really remember about this movie was the last scene, because the way they ended it was like, and don't worry, it's not really spoiling too much, but it's like they were setting up a sequel about Watergate. Like, what is this going to be part of the Watergate cinematic universe? Like, I don't know. It was just, Same with Darkest Hour. I was actually more impressed with the makeup on Gary Oldman than Gary Oldman's actual performance in this, which is what the buzz is all around. I think this movie has far too many nominations. Considering The Florida Project was only nominated for Best Supporting Actor, this is nominated in like 6 different categories. This is the movie that should have only been nominated for Best Actor. Well, Best Makeup too, obviously, but Best Picture? I mean, come on. Whatever, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm gonna do an Oscar Picks and Predictions video. Well, I'm trying to finish this one and an Oscar Picks and Predictions video, both before the Oscars comes out. But right now it's 8 p.m. on the night before, and I already have almost 60 minutes of footage to go through. And that's before I've even started with the second video. So we'll see if I can get them both out. I didn't get last year's video out about the Oscars. I'm kind of just getting sidetracked there, but yeah, the makeup in this really impressed me. It was seamless, honestly. Other than that, it was just okay. Just like the post, it was eh. Phantom Thread I thought was a little bit better. Oh, you know what? Oh, I haven't been saying the ratings. God damn it. I don't think I've said any of the ratings since The Breadwinner. Oh my god. Alright. I don't want to go back and edit all them in, so I'll just say The Boss Baby I gave a 6 out of 10. Ferdinand I gave 6 out of 10. Coco I gave 8.5 out of 10. The Florida Project 7 out of 10. Roman J. Zero Esquire 7.5 out of 10. I, Tanya 7.5 out of 10. Logan 8 out of 10. The Disaster Artist 7 out of 10. The Big Sick 7 out of 10. Molly's Game 7.5 out of 10. Mudbound 7.5 out of 10. The Post 6.5 out of 10. Darkest Hour 6.5 out of 10. And now we're on Phantom Thread, so that should bring it all up to speed. Sorry about that. So yeah, I thought Phantom Thread was a little bit better. I gave Phantom Thread a 7 out of 10. The story was interesting enough, I guess, but the movie was a little long. I get why it was stretched out to really show the tension between the characters and their relationship as it progresses, but I just think it was too slow. I didn't have enough patience for this movie, is I guess what I'm saying. It was still pretty good, though. I skimmed through an article about why Daniel Day-Lewis is retiring from acting, and the type of stuff he was saying about his work really makes me think this was an appropriate movie to be his last. Like, it's kind of funny, he's such a method actor, but his final role, he's kind of just playing an allegory of himself in a way. Anyway. Call Me By Your Name, that's back down to a 6.5 out of 10. I thought this movie is probably tied for most overrated movie nominated this year. I don't get the appeal. Most of these movies haven't really surprised me. They just have seemed like what I thought they were going to be on the surface level. In fact, I think pretty much all of the Best Picture nominees were pretty much exactly what I thought they were going to be like on the surface. And I just didn't think this movie was that interesting. I was interested in seeing how it would turn out because I saw the director's previous film, A Bigger Splash, and I expected the story here to go somewhere really interesting like that one did. Although apparently, and I only found this out recently, that was a remake of another film. So that's probably why people weren't really talking about that one when it came out, because I really think A Bigger Splash is better than Call Me By Your Name. The story was just more interesting, and other than that, they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. I mean, they're about these people like on vacation in a foreign country, acting weird. The tone is very similar, and it feels just a tiny bit pretentious. I'm thinking maybe A Bigger Splash wasn't as good as I think it was. I give that a 7 out of 10, I think. Since people weren't talking about it, the original was probably better. I'd still recommend seeing it over this, though. With Lady Bird, I really don't get the hype. Like, it was okay, I guess. I actually liked it better than some of the others I just mentioned, like Call Me By Your Name or The Post, because I gave Lady Bird a 7 out of 10. But it really doesn't feel like an Oscar movie. Like, it feels a bit more realistic than most coming-of-age movies, I guess, but it still doesn't feel like the type of movie that would get critical acclaim. Maybe it's because it's starring an actress that has been nominated for Oscars multiple times before and even won one. Or maybe it's because it's directed by an Oscar-nominated actress. It's probably one of those type of things. Like, I've made a list of actors and actresses that have been in multiple Oscar movies this year, and a lot of people that were in other Oscar-nominated movies were also in Lady Bird this year. Like, we got Lucas Hedges, who was nominated last year and was in 3 Billboards also this year. Tracy Letts, who was also in The Post this year. Timothy Chalamet, who was nominated for Call Me By Your Name. So it's just a bunch of stuff like that. So even though this doesn't feel like the movie that would be nominated for Oscars, it is because it just has those type of people working on it. It doesn't feel like an Oscar-nominated movie, but it's tied into the Oscar community. I really wish I had more to say on my thoughts about the movie other than what I think of its status, but I didn't really think much about it. I guess it made me kind of sad because it's about a kid in high school, and I only got to experience like 1 year being in a normal high school, and I wish I had gotten more time. I mean, I said this feels a little bit more realistic than most coming-of-age movies, but I guess I wouldn't really know, because I didn't get to experience going to high school or having friends or anything like that. I still thought it was fine, though. It was well done. Now I have to talk about Get Out, which I'm not looking looking forward to because I also thought this was one of the most overrated movies of the year, if I'm being honest. It really just felt like a horror movie to me. I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, I get what the big deal is. It's a movie with a black director, a black star, and where white people are the bad guys, and it was still a super successful movie. And, you know, I'm happy for this movie. I'm happy for Jordan Peele because he's great, and Daniel Kaluuya, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, he's also great. I saw him in an episode of Black Mirror, and I can tell he's a fantastic actor. I don't think he really shows that much in this movie. I also definitely don't think this is one of the best movies of the year. I just thought it was an okay horror movie. I don't really see a horror movie being the best movie of the year. I mean, I made a list of all the horror movies I've ever seen ranked, and barely any of them made it over 8 stars. I think the highest was The Shining, and I mean, that's The Shining. So, I mean, I like horror movies, but they're not usually very complicated where they're amazing movies. I also saw some videos which make me think the allegory that's supposed to be in this movie doesn't really work very well, but I'm not really going to get into that because I don't know what I'm talking about. I feel like I'm already talking out of my ass as it is. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a shame that because this movie was so successful, Jordan Peele is going to retire from acting now and just be a director from now on because I think he's a much better comedian than he is a director. Keanu was one of my favorite movies from last year, I think. I liked Keanu better than Get Out, honestly. And I was really looking forward to seeing more Key and Peele movies in the future. I know they had like a substitute teacher movie planned, although I don't know how that would work. But yeah, it's too bad. I'm gonna miss seeing him things. Even though he was in one of the worst movies I saw this year, Captain Underpants. Man, this year I said Get Out and Call Me By Your Name were two of the most overrated movies at the Oscars this year. And last year I said Moonlight, which won Best Picture, was the most overrated movie. So I guess I'm just racist and homophobic. Anyway, moving on to Dunkirk. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I said I gave Get Out a 7 out of 10. Anyway, the dunking in this movie really irked me, both in regards to basketball and donuts. But that aside, this was a pretty amazing movie. I don't think it was one of my favorite movies of the year, but I could appreciate it as one of the best movies of the year. I think Christopher Nolan did a fantastic job with this. And you won't see me arguing against a lot of the things it's nominated for, that's for sure. I don't know what else I could really add about this. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10, so yeah, I don't know. Moving on. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I didn't expect this movie to get so much critical acclaim. I mean, it's from the guy that made Seven Psychopaths, which didn't really get recognized for anything. I guess this movie is a bit more serious than that, so I guess that's why. In Bruges did get some nominations, which was his other movie. So that in mind, I guess it's not that surprising. There didn't really seem to be a traditional structure to this story. Interesting scenes just kept on happening and adding to what was going on. And I really enjoyed that. Even though I like a good story, that kind of just felt more entertaining because you didn't know where it was going to go from there. Most of the characters developed really nicely too. The ending was a bit of a low note compared to everything else, but that's fine, I guess. I can't really complain about it because all the scenes work together really well in a movie like this. So I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. And finally, The Shape of Water. That's a movie I'd recommend. Although in case it seems like it might be too long for you, I'll save you some time. The shape is hexagonal. But yeah, this wasn't really too surprising. I thought it was going to be great, and it was great. It's kind of like a spiritual successor to Creature from the Black Lagoon, except not shit and not a horror movie. It's as if Guillermo del Toro wanted to make his own reboot of that movie, but with a good and original story that's nothing like the first one. The cast was excellent. Michael Shannon is always fun to watch, and I love seeing Michael Stuhlbarg in anything. I hadn't seen much with Sally Hawkins and Richard Jenkins, but they did a great job. I don't really have a lot in particular that I want to praise this film for, other than the fact that it was really well directed. You can tell that he really had a vision of what he wanted to do. A lot of the stuff in the story and in general just happened like clockwork. It was all timed out really well. That didn't really make it realistic, but that's fine. That works for a movie like this. You have to suspend your disbelief a bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. Although one complaint I have, and it might be my only complaint, I think I had one other small thing, but I can't remember it. My one complaint is that there were a couple times throughout the film where I wasn't able to suspend my disbelief enough. There were a couple times when a character will make a decision that doesn't really make any sense for them to do, but it's just more entertaining to watch. And then also a couple times where the events in a scene or even in the story would just go by a little too quickly. I know they had a lot to condense the film's runtime, but it just bothered me a little bit. Luckily, it wasn't too much of a problem. And I know those complaints kind of go contrary to what I was complimenting the film on, but shut up. Yeah, I'd totally recommend it. 7.5 out of 10. So yeah, those are all of the movies that have been nominated at the Oscars this year, except for All the Money in the World. I wasn't able to find a good copy of that. It wasn't in theaters anymore, and the one pirated copy was like filmed in a theater, so I'll just wait to watch that. It's too bad though, because the one thing it was nominated for is like the most interesting part of that movie, movie, and that's how Kevin Spacey was replaced. And the performance that replaced it was the one thing that was nominated. So I was really looking forward to seeing how that holds up in terms of its nominatability, but whatever. Hopefully this video goes out before the Oscars, as well as the next video, which is going to be my picks and predictions for the Oscars, which if I don't finish before the Oscars probably won't go up because it doesn't really work after the fact, does it? If I say I predicted this to win and then it wins, if I say I predicted one movie to win and then it wins, but I upload the video after it already won, then it doesn't really mean anything. But whatever, you don't care about that. So to repeat myself, in the next video I'm going to talk about why I think Troll 2 should have been nominated for Best Picture.